Jason Bourne, the guy who hides from its own government. That's what we were thinking about when we pre-discussed today's subject. Thank you for joining. My name is Liewe Jan Koning, and from the Security Operations Center floor here at Onto It, we bring you Threat Talks, the deep dive, and the subject of today is APT Send Eagle. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me briefly introduce my two guests of today. On my left side, it's Martijn Peijer. He's a cybersecurity analyst at the Security Operations Center of the Dutch Tax Office. Welcome. And he knows all about this particular APT. And on my right side, it's Rob Maas. He is the field CTO of Onto It, and his job is to make sure that attacks like this do not happen. And honestly, he didn't really want to be in this threat talk because he said, there's nothing I can do. Well, that's a very depressing start, Rob. But let's then first start at what is this about? So I said your own government. So yes. Who is the attacker here and who is the victim?
Yeah, so Send Eagle. This is an APT. It's named this way by the Russian security firms, cybersecurity firms. So it's not an official APT. But they say that this APT...
Yes, because in your Western mind, an official APT is something that's recognized by...
it's
you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We don't really have any official Western APTs, of course.
NSA.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Their hacking team you could classify maybe as an APT, but they're not a threat towards the West, so that's why it's not classified as APT. So Send Eagle, yeah. There's also something linked to them. It's Operation Triangulation. Kaspersky and also these Russian security firms, they say that this operation is done by this APT, which they classify as the American government. And it was an attack on iPhones a few months ago that they managed to get a completely full access including spyware on everyone's iPhones. And it is included as targets a couple of Russian diplomats and FSB members.
Mm-hmm. iPhones. And iPhones, everybody always says, well, these are really, well, locked down machines. You can't even log onto it and see what's running on there, and they got in there.
Yeah, iPhones are really secure.
Yes,
usually
that's not easy to do. No. So we are talking about APTs, advanced. Persistent threats. Advanced, they certainly are. Then
this is really advanced because normally they use one zero-day attack, sometimes two zero-day attacks. But in this case, they used 4 zero-day attacks on the iPhones chained in a row.
Yeah, so if you would find a zero-day attack in an iPhone...
Yeah, then you would probably become a millionaire almost already.
Yeah, you go on holiday. You wouldn't be here.
Yeah. So if you find 4 zero-day attacks, you're a multimillionaire probably.
It's also an indication how much this attack has cost to build.
Yeah, it has cost a lot of money and people, I guess, and a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, you can even wonder if there was some insider intel available on how the iOS system operates.
Yeah, or maybe they stole the data, or
also an option. Yeah,
maybe it was leaked somewhere. I don't know.
At least it's not easy to find 0 days on iOS.
So 4 0 days that we need to discuss what that was. And so how did this start? Do I know I'm a victim?
No, you won't, because it all runs in the background of your iPhone. You wouldn't even notice that you're being spied on.
But don't have to click on the link or so to start with?
Zero click. Well, the initial access, the first 0 day that they used, created, is they sent you an iMessage. So you would normally just message with your colleagues or with friends, family. They would send this iMessage, but it would not even appear on your iPhone. So it's a hidden iMessage in the background. You wouldn't know it's there.
Can you send those? How do you send those?
Oh, you can do it normally, but they abused a vulnerability in a legacy font that Apple used from the 80s. And using that, they managed to include a PDF as well with malicious code inside the PDF. And they send it in the background, so you don't even know it's there.
Usually I now turn to Rob and ask him, how can we prevent this? But
well, in this case, there is something you could have done, or maybe not time-wise. Nowadays, we have the lockdown mode on the iPhone. I'm not sure if it was already there when this attack happened. Not sure what the exact start date was when they released it. But with lockdown mode, if somebody sends you an attachment on iMessage, then iMessage won't accept it if it is not someone you know. So it won't render or open the file included with the iMessage. So if lockdown mode was available and you have it turned it on, then the initial attack, the first stage in this case, would have been prevented. So turn on lockdown mode would be an option to stop this attack.
I'd love to learn more about lockdown mode in a minute, but first we are just at attack number 1.
Yeah, we're still at the first exploit. It's really sophisticated. So they use this legacy phone type. It's not even used anymore, but it's still available on the system. Then they also used return-oriented programming, call-oriented programming. And they basically bypassed all the security mechanisms. They modified the JavaScript core library environment, and they managed to execute obfuscated code.
That's all the first step. And that's getting a foothold on.
Yeah, that's basically
the
the entire first step, and they used a lot of obfuscation in the code as well to hide everything in there. It was really sophisticated.
What was the goal of this malware? Of this whole campaign?
Yeah, it's to finally the last step is to get spyware on these iPhones, so to monitor people, maybe steal credentials for further steps, and see what they're doing on their phone. So, like they said,
so it's espionage.
Yeah, a lot of targets were government officials, Russian government officials, and FSB members. So that's probably
it's nice to know their whereabouts and listen to their phone conversations, maybe.
Yeah, at least that's what Kaspersky claims. So
yeah, so that's just step 1. Very sophisticated already, but they didn't stop there, because now they were on the device, right? That's where we are. So what happens in the second 0 day?
So at the first 0 day, they had initial access, and the second 0 day, they moved on with more code execution. They actually did an integer overflow. So they could actually write data to the physical memory allocating the virtual memory to the physical memory. So where you're not supposedly to write normally. And then by exploiting this integer overflow, the attacker or attackers managed to manipulate the arguments passed to these system calls.
Yeah, because normally if you run this process, you can write your own memory that's allocated to you as a process and not to the kernel or to the phone system, whatever. And by using this exploit, like the very old like buffer overflow-like thing, they actually got on the core operating system that Tim Cook does not allow us to look at.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they had read and write access to the physical memory, so then they could command the attack even further and do more things on the system, like loading and executing malicious code.
Hey, Rob, on a regular system, my laptop, there's an EDR solution that helps me prevent this. What are the options on mobile phones?
A bit harder. There are EDR systems now for phones, but they are not very common yet. Also not sure if it would have prevented this attack, but the whole idea, of course, of running an EDR agent on your phone or on whatever system you run it on is to detect these kinds of buffer overflow and misabuse of processes. So running an EDR solution on your phone might have detected and prevented it, although the number of solutions out there, especially to run on an iPhone, are very limited at the moment.
Yeah, because iPhone, the only thing you can make an app for an iPhone is to use the official APIs. Are there now then APIs in iPhone available to do this kind of stuff? Read the root process, for example, look at file hashes? That does now exist then?
Yeah, I don't know how deep the APIs are opened for the EDR solutions. So that's completely in Apple's control. So that's the limit also for the EDR agents. But there are some solutions out there that try to run a decent EDR program on your phone and detect this kind of abuse of your phone.
And deplete your battery halfway throughout the day.
Well, we tested with it and that was quite okay. So, but yeah, it's something that scans with every process. So yeah, it takes a bit of battery.
So it should now then be on everybody's list.
We'll definitely see this more and more because these attacks are rising. Everyone has a phone. There's a lot of data on there, so it's a target.
Okay. So Martijn, we were talking about the first two. The one was to gain access. The first 0 days, second 0 days to get root access. However, if iPhone is so sophisticated, there's still stuff in place to protect you, advanced systems. So there was another 0 day involved. Can you talk us a little bit through that one?
Yes, that's the third 0 day that they created. You have in iPhone you have the PPL and MMIO. These are basically security mechanisms in place so that critical system functions, critical system memory functions can be overwritten or modified. And this is also something they abused. So PPL stands for Page Protection Layer, and MMIO stands for Memory Mapped I/O, input and output. And what they did was actually they leveraged this MMIO to registers to manipulate the memory mappings used by the PPL.
It's good that we have an infographic created from this, and it's in the show notes. So download it, and you'll see it in a schema, and it probably makes a little bit more sense then. So, but they were able to go around those, right? These are highly sophisticated protection mechanisms. We see them on iPhones, but Apple has a good track record on this. I mean, if you're root on your Mac OS, your Mac OS device, your Mac, you're also not really root. So sometimes you need to reboot. In order to do some, so this is the kind of systems we're talking about.
Yeah, so this is actually normally protecting the memory, and by abusing this, they managed to actually get also were able to do this unauthenticated and edit those protected memory areas.
So now they were really king on the device.
Yeah,
and persistent reboots.
Yeah, there's something else they wanted to do was also erase the traces. So another thing they included with this third CVE, third 0 day, was that they use the IM agent process. This is a background process running on the iPhone. It handles the FaceTime and iMessage communication, stuff like that. So they also injected the payload into the IM agent background process to erase all the traces of the attack up until now. So
nice. So it's hard to detect it as well.
They didn't want to be found.
How on earth did they ever find this malware in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they have a really good research department and a lot of people with a lot of knowledge about these devices as well.
It reminds me a little bit about Pegasus.
Yeah, Pegasus is also malware for iPhones that was created to spy on government officials.
Yeah, there was. I thought it was Israelis.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, but I remember scanning all our phones for this malware, and it wasn't. I mean, there were some detections possible, but they were all in the second degree or so.
Yeah,
and so the result came back as no evidence found. But don't treat this as evidence that it didn't happen. Right? And same here then again. It's similar.
Yeah, that's also what they're putting a lot of effort and time to, not only to get into the system and manipulate the system, but they're also erasing all their traces because they do not want to be found.
But these attacks are so sophisticated. If we compare this with the ones about of the last 2 weeks, the one, the Barracuda one, for example, and the satellite hack, they were much easier to see.
Yeah, when you broke those down in steps, they were fairly simple steps. These steps are quite complicated and all 0 days, so not known before they were discovered. So this is really advanced.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what is already installed on my phone that we don't know about yet.
Better not think about it.
But we're still not there because we are at exploit number 3, and there is and you still don't have a remedy against this.
No, this is the same. EDR might have helped a bit here, but this is so deep into the system that
if they can do this, they can also disable EDR, right?
Probably, yeah.
So, step 4 then. I mean, if this wasn't enough already, then what's the last step? What did they achieve there?
Yeah, so the fourth final step, it's another CVE, it's another 0 day. This is where this is their final goal, to get the spyware actually on the target devices. So what they did is they also found a vulnerability in Safari, which is another great accomplishment, of course. So not only in the Apple device, but also in the Safari. They managed to launch a hidden Safari window in the background of the phone. This would go to a specific web page, and they would abuse how Safari handles the processing of these web pages to, again, install malicious code on the device. What they did was first they checked if it was the correct device, because they only want to infect the correct devices, and they would also check if the first 3 steps had been completely finished already, and then they would do this step. They would then connect to a command and control server, and download the spyware, which is dubbed as Triangle DB. And this spyware collects all kind of information on the device, such as login credentials, personal data, everything that's necessary to know for them. And also it uninstalls itself after 30 days automatically. So even if the connection with the C2 server is lost, it would still uninstall itself. So they put a lot of effort into erasing that traces, so it would never be
if
found.
this content control would go down, it would go away, and probably there was some kind of command in the C2 that said, hey, extend your removal deadline for a bit, so we can
they could indeed
but why did they have to go to this attack then? Because they were already on the system, they could manipulate the iMessage, they could do everything. Why wasn't that enough then? What did this bring extra?
Yeah, because this is the actual spyware, so they could actually harvest the credentials, see the photos that they made, everything that's on the device. Yeah. And another thing they did is they didn't make it persistent. I think it again has to do with being found, being traced. So if you would reboot your device, the exploit would be completely gone, the spyware would be gone, and they would have to send the iMessage again from the first step to completely start the process all over.
Yeah, so, okay, but that was so easy. So
yeah, but how many times do people actually turn off their iPhones? Usually
really shut down.
Really shut down completely. Yeah. Usually you just charge it and keep using it for weeks or months in a row. So.
Yeah, this is so advanced. It's really, I mean, what can you do? I mean, we talked about having separate phones, and one of the phones not connected at all. I mean, you had another reason to do that.
You could have a Nokia.
Of a no phone.
No phone. Yeah, the no phone is amazing. For distraction-free work, it helps. Huh? It's impossible these days to work without a phone, of course. But indeed, your critical stuff maybe on a separate phone, that is a factor. But I want to get back to the lockdown mode, because there is a reason. I remember thinking that when Apple came out with it, it was like, they must have learned something the hard way, and maybe this was it. I don't know. We will never know. But what does it? Why won't we all turn it on? Is there?
It comes back to some features that will be limited.
Yeah, because it says to me, if you look at your phone, you can look it up, but it's not enabled by default, lockdown mode. But it tells you, hey, if you are a high profile target, most people won't need it. But then you can use
this. It's kind of a discouragement to turn it on. And that's mainly in the sharing feature. So we already talked about iMessage and sending attachments. But also in this step, they use the web browser, and that executes on some scripts on the background. If you turn on lockdown mode, then a lot of scripts will be impossible to be executed, which might cause some websites to load slowly. So that's one of the downsides, I would say, if you turn it on.
Slowly, but it still works.
It still works, And at least in most web pages, the scripts that are not executed will not make the website unavailable, but just to load slowly. The other things is FaceTime. You can only accept FaceTime calls for people you already have as a contact. So you cannot simply get called by FaceTime in this case.
Sounds like an advantage.
For some and for some not, I think. Sharing photos is harder. You cannot have a shared album, for example.
So your family album goes away.
Yeah, it will not pop. The feature is simply not there if you turn on lockdown mode. I think.
But it means if you have it today and you enable it, what happens then? It will just.
I have not tried it myself, but I guess you will just see the album, but it's not shared anymore, I guess, because the photos are on your phone.
And you can enable it just on your phone, and on your Mac it's still because it's not synced.
As far as I know, it's not synced. It's just the phone on your phone itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Another thing is that you cannot simply attach other devices to your phone, and the phone must be unlocked. So if you have Apple CarPlay, for example, you need to unlock your phone, otherwise the connection won't be set up. SharePlay, so watch together a video, for example, won't work. And I think those are all the features.
It's not that bad.
Especially if you are a high-profile target, then I think this is really considerable to turn on. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this small sparkle of hope.
There's maybe one more on this, the last step, and that counts almost for every attack. In the end, the attackers need to gain the data or and the data they collected. That they need some kind of communication, command and control to get everything out. You still can debate if an always-on VPN or a SASE solution, sending all traffic over your controlled network, then at least you can see what communication is going on. To be honest, in this case, this attack was so advanced and they have such high privileges that they probably can make a split tunnel and a route option. They're saying, okay, but this traffic is not going over that VPN. But in normal cases with less advanced attacks, you can then at least see what's going on, scan the traffic, hopefully have some IOCs implemented that will block communication with command and control service.
Okay. Yeah, so let's do it. And what about the battery life of that? Constantly over a VPN tunnel?
The numbers that you see are very,
asking,
very...
I'm asking because I remember the first time it happened years ago.
Yeah,
these solutions came in and it would really deplete it would really be half.
It was really bad. It's far better now, but still you get a penalty when you have an always-on VPN. And then depending on the technology you use, the penalty is high or low. I see numbers now are around 13%.
13.
Yeah, 13, yeah. Which I think if you really need to protect yourself is reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we should all investigate this, I guess, then, huh? Gentlemen, thank you very much for your insights. You didn't make me feel more comfortable, honestly. But it's very good to know that this is all around, and it's good that we have CTI to teach us all these things, and in this case, the Russians to tell us what we are doing, right? So with that, I say goodbye to you. Just before, I would say in the show notes, you will find the infographics. I mentioned them before, and you'll see diagrams on these attacks and all the steps explained. So, well, use them if you want to talk about it in your own company, to get some awareness done, or for whatever reason, they are there for you to use. You can freely use them. Gentlemen, thank you very much once again. Thank you, listeners, to tune in today. If you like this, please like our this episode. It will help us spread the word. And of course, you can subscribe so you make sure next time you have our next episode in your inbox. We'd love your feedback. Mail us at team@threat-talks.com. And from the Security Operations Center floor here at Onto It, thank you once again and hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and M6. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.